Hello and welcome to episode 22 of My Life as a Critic. I am professional film critic Sean Patrick, and on the show I talk about my old reviews and my life and how things have changed since I wrote the review and whether or not my opinion changes. We'll find out because I'll watch the movie again and give it another review. It's a second chance opportunity for the movie and for me to kind of see how I feel and how I've changed, and whether or not my opinions have changed, whether or not myself as a critic, if I've grown or if I'm getting better or worse or whatever. Hopefully better. I'm assuming better. I work professionally now as a film critic, so I better be getting better at it. Today we're going to talk about the movie Moon from director Duncan Jones. It's a film that was very popular when it came out and made Duncan Jones an instant star. There was something of a cult that grew up around this movie among people who really hadn't even, honestly, many of them hadn't even seen the movie. And they were talking about how much they loved it, which really irritated me. But that had nothing to do with my opinion of the movie. That really is something that I learned afterwards, was from people who talked about just... A lot of times, this happens with sci-fi fans especially, where they just assume something is brilliant just based on their wanting it to be brilliant. And then they watch the movie and their expectations are met, and they're very happy about that. That is a judgment of just some sci-fi fans. It's a stereotype of sci-fi fans, but I'm sure if you're a film fanatic, if you're somebody who just tries to cultivate yourself a community of moviegoers, then you know of these people. You met these people who kind of create their own idea of what a sci-fi movie is supposed to be and then wait for a movie to come along. They start liking it even before they see it, and then they have their expectations met. And that's certainly what happened in many cases with Moon. That's not to say that other people are wrong in saying that they liked it. If you watched the movie and you enjoyed it, that's fine. But I'm telling you, I spoke to a number of people who just liked this movie specifically because it was a sci-fi film, and it was Duncan Jones, who is the son of David Bowie, and they just made up their mind that it was brilliant. They also heard a couple reviews that said it was also brilliant. And they set about trying to shut down anybody who disagreed with them. So I got a lot of angry mail when I wrote about this movie and talked about why I didn't like it. And, we'll read my review now, and we'll discuss it and talk about some of the reactions that I got to it. So here's my review from 2009 of Moon for zoiksonline.com. While the obvious influence of Stanley Kubrick's 2001 is a worthy subject in relation to the sci-fi flick Moon, the film has an unspoken subject that I find much more interesting. The ways in which the plot machine of Moon plays out without what one might expect. It acts as an anti-thriller. Moon sets up a very particular idea that invites a kind of M. Night Shyamalan-style twist and then goes about avoiding it at all cost. In doing so, the film attempts a cooler-than-thou attitude towards Shyamalan's populist, twisty thrillers, and Moon comes off pretentious for the effort. Moon stars Sam Rockwell as Sam Bell, a lone worker on a base on the dark side of the moon. Sam is a handyman for a self-contained machine that harvests helium-3 from the moon. If something breaks down, old Sammy runs out and fixes it right up. Sammy is near the end of what is supposed to be a 3-year contract and looks forward to returning to Earth and the wife and child he left behind. Why Sam left a budding family back on Earth for an empty shell on the moon for 3 years is only one of the intriguing questions that director Duncan Jones and writer Nathan Parker pose in setting up what one might quite fairly assume is a major twist to come. Whether that twist arrives or not is honestly debatable. The storytelling style of Moon is muted to the point of whispering. Kevin Spacey is the voice of a HAL-esque computer called Gertie, somehow not a cool acronym, and his soothing tone matches the overall tone of the movie, a movie that is quiet with a purpose. The quiet is meant as a near-silent rebuke to the noise of all the modern science fiction, and while one can appreciate the gesture, Moon grows so quiet at times that one longs for Bruce Willis to fly by on an asteroid just to liven things up. That's a joke. I was joking. I got called out on that a couple times. Like, really? You want Bruce Willis in this movie? You want Armageddon? I hate Armageddon. I do. I was making a joke just about how incredibly quiet Moon is at times. That's what the joke was, just a joke. About the agony of watching a movie that was so incredibly quiet to the point of just being, almost non-existent. The, quote, thriller aspect of Moon, unquote, which kicks in with the introduction of a second Sam Bell in the space station, is played as a knock on the twisty thrills of M. Night Shyamalan. The two Sams begin a simultaneous search for answers, and the audience is led to believe a major revelation or twist is in the offing. I don't mind having my expectations upended, but what does happen should be better than what I predicted or hoped for. The ungainly, confused ending of Moon, some would call it open-ended, but they're only justifying enjoying it, fails to critique Shyamalan's admittedly stale twist endings, and especially fails to top them. For all of Shyamalan's failures, his jolty endings to The Sixth Sense and Signs remain classic shockers. If you want to take them on, you'd better damn well have a better idea. Moon sadly does not. Now, I have to point out here that that's me bringing a lot to this movie. I'm assuming the intention here is to critique a kind of M. Night Shyamalan style twist, when in fact that's not really what this movie intended at all. Or at least I have no way of knowing whether it did or not. Duncan Jones never came out and said, I'm trying to play a twist on, I'm trying to play off of, upending expectations, surprise endings, twists. He never said anything like that. That was me bringing that to that. And for that, I do need to apologize for this review, because you can't review a movie's intentions based on what you think the movie intends. I mean, yeah, I could certainly try and apply that to it. You could try and apply a bigger thought to it. That's a lot of what criticism is, at least social criticism, or more of a social criticism, is the kind of thing where you try and bring outside aspects to a movie, whether that movie intends to have those outside aspects brought to them or not. We call that, or it's been called by other professionals, social criticism as opposed to actual film criticism. And I did that a lot early on in my career, brought a lot of outside aspects to movies, and I don't think that's fair. So maybe this time as I watch this movie, maybe with 7 years on, I can hopefully look at this movie differently and not try and think of it that way. Shyamalan was kind of in the news at the time, I believe. There was still a lot of talk about him and his twists, and I think I brought just a lot of that to this movie, and that's really not fair. That's not what this movie was. That said, most of the hate mail I got was regarding the Armageddon reference, which was a joke. It was sarcasm. Whether or not, maybe it wasn't strong enough sarcasm. Maybe it was too personal because people don't know how much I hate Armageddon. But again, that's also kind of bad writing on my part, because I didn't communicate well enough that I was kidding about wanting Bruce Willis to come by in an asteroid. I was making a joke at the film's expense. And again, that's kind of stupid too, because you're not really critiquing the movie. You're just trying to show up the movie or one-up it or riff it. And should not have been my intention. So when I watch it now, I'm going to try and give Moon a much more fair observation, and we'll see where it goes. This is going to be interesting because who knows? Maybe I'll like Moon this time. Maybe I'll be able to get out of the headspace of that guy 7 years ago and actually try and take a look at this movie for what it is. And of course, Warcraft coming out this weekend. I'm also fighting, kind of instinct on that one, because I really don't like video game movies. I don't like Warcraft specifically. Doesn't particularly appeal to me. But I did like Source Code. Duncan Jones, I know, can direct. Moon, for what I didn't mention in my review, from what I do recall being a very good-looking movie, and at least a movie with some ideas to it. I criticized the film for being pretentious, I guess, in the review, and pretentious is too often a criticism. Frankly, some movies could use some pretense. So, let me take a look at another look at Moon, and if I come back feeling the same way, well, I'll tell you about it after this. Look, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I was wrong about Moon. I'm not a fan of the movie. It's not bad, though, and what's bad is my review. My review is terrible. It's a terrible review. I'm embarrassed to have written it. I don't know quite I'm the headspace I must have been in at the time. Just spending a lot of time thinking about M. Night Shyamalan for some reason. I don't know why I hooked onto that. It's 7 years ago, so I guess I can't really fault myself not knowing exactly what it was that drew me to that line of thinking, but Regardless, it was an idiot review. I can say that. I wrote it, so I mean I'm in a perfect position to tell you how dumb it is. And the movie itself, it doesn't really match anything. Even the joke I made about it being so quiet and ponderous that I was kind of hoping for a Bruce Willis to fly by on an asteroid. Again, a joke. I don't like Armageddon at all, but I was making a joke about how ponderous I thought the film was at the time. That's not true. The movie isn't that bad. It has a actually pretty good pace for its near 100 minutes. Sam Rockwell is, entertaining enough. The issue isn't that. I was really just working toward the joke there. I wanted to make that crack about Bruce Willis and the asteroid and the film being slow, and I don't know. I'm embarrassed by the review because I just don't think it's very good criticism for the most part. I was talking a lot about what this movie isn't, other movies it could be, or my expectations of them, whatever. That's not the point. The point is that this isn't nearly as bad as I made it out to be, and then again, but I want to state clearly, I'm not a fan of the movie. Even watching it the second time, I still come away cold to the film. I think it's a surface level movie for the most part. It introduces ideas about cloning and about the ethics of what's going on in this space station, but that's mostly just surface level stuff. This is kind of stuff that is more built toward, I don't want to say a thriller, but just not necessarily a movie that's all that interested in actually talking about ideas as it is in introducing them. So introducing the idea of cloning or introducing the idea of ethics and business that the film kind of introduces but really isn't engaged in. Essentially, and there's going to be spoilers in this. There was already spoilers in my idiot review because, again, I put a spoiler in there talking about the two Sam Bells, which is, again, another embarrassment to discuss about that review. But we're going to have to do spoilers here to talk about why I'm such an idiot. and still why I don't think this movie is that particularly great. It introduces ideas about cloning and about business ethics because this is essentially a space station on the moon that is being operated by a corporation that instead of hiring people to actually handle this mining operation on the moon, they've been cloning the same guy, Sam Bell, for the past 12 years, 13, 15 years, something like that. They've been cloning him repeatedly every 3 years to put a new clone in. They don't actually tell us why it has to be 3 years, but we sense from what we see in a kind of a video flashback situation that one of the Sams watches that basically clones probably don't last much longer than 3 years. Anyway, back to the point. This mining operation is being operated by a guy named Sam Bell, played by Sam Rockwell. He seems to die in this accident while checking on one of the mining machines. But he's not dead. Meanwhile, his machines back home have woken up another Sam Bell clone. Kevin Spacey is Gertie, the computer that runs everything. HAL 9000 is the obvious reference there. Gertie has woken another clone, assuming that Sam was dead, and leaving him for dead out there. The new clone goes out and figures out a way to get out of the building after it had been locked down, and actually goes out to the crash site, finds what he thinks might be the body of his predecessor, and it turns out to be the body of one of the many clones. This new clone doesn't seem all that particularly blown away by this. Neither of them do. They seem to both take it really well, which is kind of odd. But I guess both assume that the other one is the clone, and that's how they're able to rationalize what they're seeing. But really, they're both clones of Sam Bell, who did leave after 3 years and went home to his family, and the company kept cloning him over and over again in order, I guess, to get cheap labor, maybe? Because, again, that's not really something that's explained. The film tackles somewhat the idea of the ethics of cloning. It doesn't tackle it at all, really. It just kind of introduces the idea of, hey, isn't it cruel that they created these clones? And what would happen if there was a real clone in this situation? And he's got memories of this person who actually exists, who's back on Earth living the life that this clone thinks he's going back to, but he's really not. again, it introduces the idea, and that's fine. It's something that people, I guess, maybe could think about on their own and make up their own minds and their own morality about it. But the film isn't really engaged in that conversation. It's engaged in kind of telling a sci-fi story that's kind of going to keep your attention, but not really challenge you all that much, or challenge you to think about its ideas all that much. The clones play ping pong. They have brief conversations. They each accuse the other of being the clone, but there's nothing really particularly tense about it. There's no real excitement or interest. There's a fight scene, kinda, that happens in the movie, but it's not really all that particularly interesting. I don't think there's much going on here in Moon. I think it's kind of a cool idea, but it's a surface idea. It's a just kind of, let's talk, here's a couple ideas, but really we're just making kind of a space thriller, but it's also kind of arty and pretentious, so it's not conventional thriller. It doesn't have conventional thriller beats where you're scared or you're tense for these characters. It's a character study in a way, but the character isn't particularly interesting. The Sam Bell character, he's okay, and he seems like a nice enough guy, but he's not all that mind-blowingly interesting. He's just kind of there and kind of in this situation. What happens at the end with one of the Sam Bells escaping to Earth, we hear kind of the beginnings of the conversation that the film seems to want to introduce about the ethics of cloning, the ethics of mining on the moon, and what it takes to have done that. There's a bit of a conversation started there, but it's the very end of the movie, and the movie ends after the idea is introduced. Specifically, it's introduced by a seemingly right-wing radio host, because most AM radio hosts are right-wing and kind of blowhards, and that's kind of how this radio character sounds as we hear him just before the end credits, talking about accusing this Sam clone of being a liar or being a fake or wanting him arrested or something. Again, that seems to be more of a commentary on big business and the lack of ethics and morality in big business. But again, he's introducing that idea at the very end of the movie. Now, granted, it's kind of there once you realize what's taken place and how they've cloned this guy for 15 years or something, and how unethical that is, especially when it's so cruel to the character of Sam Bell, who thinks that he's going home. These clones, who are real people and realistic human beings, very realistic human beings, it is unethical to have done that and to give them memories that aren't real and all that stuff. But the film introduces that idea. It's not really interested in having a discussion about it, and it's certainly not interested. I guess it takes a side at the very least. It seems to say that cloning would be wrong, but again, you could do that. You could make that point any number of ways. This movie makes it in a way that's kind of abstract and kind of uninvolved for the most part. I just don't think this movie is that great. It's kind of good looking. It's kind of a grungy space thing, which I know I appreciate. Spaced as a lived-in kind of thing is kind of a nice idea. Star Wars did that, so few sci-fi films have explored that same idea. But for the most part, I just don't think this film is all that particularly engaged in any kind of ideas. Nothing bigger or broader than what you see on the screen. Cloning is wrong. It's cruel. These clones are real. There's got to be something more to it. I guess it's the idea of what makes somebody human. Is it their memories? Is it their actions? Again, the film introduces that, but doesn't really have a particularly interesting conversation about it. I don't find the film particularly challenging. So that's it. My review is garbage. My initial 2009 review was absolutely terrible, and I apologize for it. But I'm still not convinced that Moon is this grand masterpiece that so many other people seem to say that it was. There were a lot of fawning over this film back in the day that I'm sure probably affected my review in many ways, because anytime I see that level of fawning praise on something, I tend to react against it. For the most part, Mad Max and even Jungle Book to a point. Recently, I like both of those movies, but I didn't love either one of those movies. And and I guess a small, very small part of it was just the amount of unending praise that each received that I had to, I guess, find fault somewhere. Although, again, it wasn't. It sounds unethical. It's not. It's part of the whole experience of the movie. Mad Max is a good movie. It's not, to me, a masterpiece. Jungle Book is a good movie. It's not, to me, a masterpiece. I think there's just... It's good. It's entertaining. It's, kind of far more modest than the massive artistic spectacular that so many other people see. And I think my criticisms of those films are fair and not just based on my wanting to be different from everybody else. Again, I liked both of those movies. I don't particularly like Moon, but it's not all about how other people reacted to it. It's about that I just don't think the film is particularly... There I go with... I keep saying that over and over again, don't I? I just don't feel like the film is all that engaged in the ideas that it seems to introduce, but not really explore. And that, to me, makes the film come up rather short. It's a good-looking movie. Duncan Jones is a fine director. He goes on to prove that with Source Code, his next film, which is exceptional in a sci-fi film. Big, broad ideas, really great characters, good story. More conventional, yes, than Moon. Unquestionably more conventional, but far more entertaining and I think engaged in its ideas than this film is than Moon was in its ideas. And that's why I like Source Code a lot and why I don't particularly... God, sorry. But that's why you don't hear a tick until you actually hear it in your head, and then you realize you have it. And I just don't think Moon is that great. Sorry, folks. I'm not convinced. I've seen it twice now, and I'm just not blown away by it. I know there's a lot of people who love this movie, and have at it. Love it all you like. I just disagree. I just don't think it's all that engaged in those ideas, and if you want to disagree, feel free. Tell me why you think it is engaged in those ideas, or tell me why you think it's more entertaining than I think it is. That's fine. I would love to hear from you. This has been episode 22 of My Life as a Critic. I am professional film critic Sean Patrick.